Hi, it's Alison from the Law School Toolbox. Today I'm here with Lee to talk about a topic we have been thinking a lot about, which is whether social media is destroying our ability to focus. So, welcome, Lee.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
this is something we've been kind of talking around, I feel like, for a while amongst ourselves. But last week, we got real about our own social media usage. We actually have video footage of us reviewing how much time we were spending on our phones on social media. I have to be honest, it was horrifying.
It really was.
It was horrifying. It's not a moment
Yeah.
I'm going to forget anytime soon. And so we decided on the spot that we were going to go cold turkey for a week. And this has been 1 week to the day. And we were just going to stop using any type of social media. So, Lee, how's that going for you?
Yeah, it has been a really interesting week. First of all, one, I can't believe we took videos of ourselves checking our screen time usage. Two, I can't believe you didn't know that you could check your screen time usage.
Hey, I learned something.
That's right. So I think it's really important to start with what were the pain points that led to us wanting to do this. And I think for me, the pain points were, I was mostly using Instagram because I'm terrified of TikTok. And when we checked our usage, I was using it for 1 to 2 hours a day, which is just really hard to say out loud to a lot of people listening to this podcast.
And I'll just note, one of those 2+ hour days was your actual birthday.
It was. Yes, it was my birthday. I was also starting to scroll like first thing in the morning and scroll at night before I went to bed. So that's how I was starting and ending my day in bookends. And I was really starting to feel like I was getting bombarded with advertisements or the content that IG wanted me to look at, based on my age, the fact that I have kids. There's a lot on Instagram about being a middle-aged woman. Like there's just like a lot. And I was just feeling like I was taking in all this information, much of which I did not want. So it felt like I was kind of at a moment. And so it was good that we decided to do this together.
for moral support.
For moral support. So when I reflect on my last week, I mean, in a way, it's been a busy week. And I did some traveling, so I had a lot of downtime. So it was a really interesting week to do this experiment. The good has been I have had more time to read. I've read 1.5 books in the last week. I've had some time to just be bored, which I think is also interesting. When I'm waiting somewhere, I'll check my email, and if nobody writes to me, then I just stand there. So that's good, I guess. Boredom is supposed to be important to how our brains reconcile information. And so I think boredom is important, and we're very seldom bored anymore. I will say I am more focused. I don't feel like my attention is being constantly split or that I'm holding as much information either about the world or that I'm just taking in. I feel like I'm just in my own space I have plenty of information and stuff that I deal with. So, I mean, I feel like it's a more manageable amount of stuff that my brain is processing, which is a powerful feeling. I think my attention span is better. It's easier to put down my phone. I've been laying it like on the charger when I get home from working, and that's been better. And it's not been a great week for the news. And not that I don't know the last time it was a good week for the news, but I get to choose when I learn about it. It's not just like dropped in throughout my day. And I think that's been really good for my mental health and outlook as well. So when I tried to think of bad things, it was that I didn't get to see some of my friends' first day of school pictures. I actually had to text a friend and say, like, will you send me your kids' first day of school pictures? Because I'm taking a social media break. I mean, if that's the worst of it, I think there's a big lesson in there.
Yeah, no, so much of what you're saying, I 100% relate to. For me, it was Instagram. And then I got really hooked on Threads, like around the election and afterwards. And yeah, I would wake up and I would spend 30 to 45 minutes before I got out of bed, scrolling through social media. See, we are here with you in this
We
fight.
are here with you.
Yeah, so
Yep.
that was how I started my day. And then all throughout the day, of course, I'm like, if I want to turn my brain off for a few minutes or I'm in line for coffee or whatever, like same thing, just like scroll, scroll, scroll. And then yeah, at night, which honestly I think might have been the worst for me, was I was literally spending like, I would get tired, like say maybe at 10 or so, and I would spend 1 to 2 hours scrolling mindlessly through social media. Like most of it was kind of alarmist. Like trying to basically like turn my brain
Yeah,
off.
trying to relax.
Yeah, trying to relax. I'm not really sure why it made sense that like literally just scrolling through information and text and images was going to turn my brain off, but somehow that's what happened, or I just got so tired I finally collapsed. Maybe it was. I don't know. Yeah, so that was my usage. And it was interesting because I think the first morning you contacted me and were like, how's it going? I'm like, well, I went to bed earlier because I had nothing to do. And that seemed great. But then I woke up a few hours later and I felt like my brain was just like churning because it hadn't had like all the external stimuli, I guess, to turn it off.
And the dopamine hits. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hadn't had that. So the first night I was literally like awake in the middle of the night being like, oh my God, like I haven't had my like 2 hours of just like stuff. And
yeah, you're going through withdrawals.
Withdrawals. It felt like a withdrawal. I will say pretty quickly after that, it was fine. And yeah, I mean, for me, the good is definitely, I mean, I have so much more time. I mean, it's incredible actually. And I'm filling that time with things like, oh, maybe I'll do an extra session at the gym because I have 2 extra hours a day. I've made some ice cream from scratch. I made a cake. I took a book off my bookshelf about sourdough bread that I'd never opened and didn't remember why I bought, but it has a whole section on panettone. And I was like, oh, that really sounds interesting. Maybe I'm going to start this really involved baking project in all of my free time. I do find it's a lot easier for me to do like small tasks. So like this morning, for example, I was like, gonna unload the dishwasher, and oftentimes in the past my dishwasher might have sat unloaded for hours because I was like, oh, I'll just pop onto Instagram for a second, like then I'll do this after that. And when you don't have that crutch, I was like, or I could just unload the dishwasher right now and move on with my day.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing, or like I just have to do this like one thing to send an email to someone. I'm just finding it so much easier to do those things.
Yeah. There's just not the pull that there's this better thing that you should be spending your time on, even though it's not better.
It's really not. And that for me is one of the things I've really been thinking about is kind of how did we end up here?
I know.
How did I end up here? And when I think back to like when I started using Instagram, I have certain interests. I followed people who do bread and who travel and like my friends, and maybe they're into flower arranging, whatever. It was like this very pleasant sort of thing that I'd curated, and like I was seeing stuff that was interesting, and I was fine with that. But now I feel like I have a theory. So my hypothesis is everything has become basically like TikTok. And so there, like, you're not picking what you want to see. They're just feeding you stuff. And it's designed to be like highly, highly, highly addictive. And so I feel like everything has kind of converged into that format of, I had this rule for a while. Like I said, we've been talking about this for a while. So I had created this rule for myself on Instagram where if I saw 3 things in a row that I had not like personally picked out to, decided to follow, I would shut it down. Why did I think that was an okay ratio? But, even it had gotten to the point literally where if I followed that rule, was constantly closing it because they were not showing me things that I had ever asked to have any input on seeing. And it started to get weird. Like, it was like every day there was like a new thing they were trying out. And I think I told you that at some point it was like young women with cancer videos. And I'm like, why am I seeing these all of a sudden? Like so many of them. This is really distressing. I don't know these people. It's terrible what they're going through. But like, why is this information coming to me? And I can't really answer that other than they were just like, oh, let's just put this out there and see if you watch one, because it's kind of shocking the first time they show up and you're like, is this what's going on? And then every single day it's like more and more and more and more. And I mean, I don't know that my life is improved by seeing videos of people I don't know who have cancer.
No, I got a steady stream of melanoma videos.
Oh
Like
gosh.
it was like a lot. And then you're like freaking out. You're like, when am I going to the dermatologist again? Like, what is happening? Do I have melanoma? Like it is anxiety inducing sometimes to get this content.
Yeah.
You know?
Often.
And
And
it's hard to make it stop.
yeah. And part of what I've been reading about is literally like, it's by design.
Yes.
This is not an accident.
No. No, no, no. Not at all an accident. You know, I was mentioning that I was, you know, any woman who's over really 30 is getting bombarded with content about women and aging these days, I believe. And so to counterpoint much of that advertising and information, and a lot of it is negative, some of it is sort of positive, I don't know, but it's a lot of information. So I had come across this book called Tough Broad, which is basically about aging, but it's about women adventurers and the benefits of being physically active and doing adventure, whatever the adventure may be, like well into your 80s. And this is something you and I talk about because of skiing. Like,
yeah.
you know, you see octogenarians skiing, you ski with octogenarians. Like, it's pretty amazing.
They're good. Some of
and
them.
They're good. Like, I hope we're skiing together when we're octogenarians. But I realized that I like replaced a lot of this negative content. And like, you know, it was just my birthday. It's like when we think about a lot of these things with this book, I feel much better about myself.
Right.
I'm 135 pages into a book about women doing things that they love to bring joy to their lives as they age. And I feel pretty good about aging, actually, much better than I did a week ago when the Instagram knew it was my birthday and was just hammering me with content around aging. And what's interesting is in this Tough Broad book, they're talking about the power of your mindset when it comes to aging and cognitive decline. And I'm like, oh my gosh, IG is like killing my mindset about aging. I need to be like reading books that are actually showing me that it's, you know, not the end of the world. And it was just kind of a very interesting counterpoint of like a bunch of content I got last week that made me feel bad about myself. And then some content that I opted into that's making me feel good about myself.
Yeah. And I think that for me is really like what I've kind of been sitting with is like, what am I opting into and what do I need to opt out of? And also just going back to like just the insane amount of time that is being monetized with my eyeballs. You know, and is this really how I want to spend my limited set of hours on this planet? Probably not. Yes, but I think it is interesting. 'Cause, you know, nobody wants to be like in a cave someplace. And I also kind of went cold turkey on a lot of like actual legacy media around and after the election for various reasons. So I haven't had that set of inputs. So I kind of replaced it with social media because I wanted to feel like, oh, I need to like stay up to date and be informed. But I just got this deluge of negativity. So yeah, I've kind of been opting into things like certain newsletters and things, and some of them you've shared with me because you're like, this person has an interesting viewpoint, they're an expert and they have reliable information, maybe you would also like to sign up for their newsletter. And I'm like, yes, thank you. So I think it is this, you know, and I mean, we met on Twitter, that's the reality. You know, like we see the value theoretically in these types of things, but I think we also had to get like pretty serious about where we've ended up.
Yeah, and when we met on Twitter many years, I think it's like 14 years
forever ago, basically.
Forever ago, yeah. I think it's 14 years ago soon, like in October. And it wasn't the same. Like you didn't spend hours and hours and hours a day scrolling Twitter. There wasn't that much stuff on it. It wasn't as sensationalized. It was just a different time. It really was different. And I think that this, in a way, has been a death by a thousand cuts. You know, it's like we started using these platforms that did give us benefits. And I'm not to say that I get no benefits out of IG. I definitely do. But, you know, each new platform, which is designed to be more addictive, more visual, you know, more. But we haven't really evolved as people. We are the same people. And the technology is just getting better to manipulate us. And I think that's what's really hard. You know, I'm a parent, and so I spend a lot of time thinking about my kids and technology, reading about kids and technology, and I've read The Anxious Generation and all of the companion books around the anxious generation about why we shouldn't be subjecting our kids and their brains, who are not developed enough to funnel through all of this rapid information. Yeah, for somehow I think it's good for mine. Like, I mean, or it's not harmful for mine. Maybe I don't think it's good, but it doesn't like create harm. And I've got to say, this social media detox specifically, and I have done some of these before, really has made me think that it is doing harm to not just who I am in those hour to 2 hours I was giving to Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, but to like the rest of my day. And like showing, like, we're trying to do a big project together, which is going to take a lot of attention and work. I greatly enjoy collaborating with you on projects. That's why we've been working together for 14 years. I am going to have more fun with that project because I have more attention span and the ability to think deeply, and I'm not constantly distracted. And I want to do that. Like, that gives me joy. That is much better than whatever random video I get that I probably don't even want to see.
Yeah, no, I think it's been eye-opening. Like, I really didn't know actually how much time I was spending until we sat down last week and looked at the numbers, and they were horrifying.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was I think more than 10 hours a week. And when I realized that in 1 month, that is a 40-hour work week, that was very eye-opening. I was like, what could I be doing with that time?
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is reading a lot of books,
Yep.
doing research, thinking about things. And I mean, to bring it back to kind of the law school context, I think if you're in law school, you really have to be thinking seriously about this. Like, how much time are you actually wasting every day? You can get this information from your phone.
Yeah.
Maybe record yourself for later reference. And also, is it making you happy?
Yeah.
Is it making it easier to get your work done so that you can actually have a life outside of your schoolwork? And one of the things we've been talking about, are there other ways to meet whatever need this seems to be meeting or you think it's meeting without the time and, all of the other stuff?
Yeah. And I think that's tricky because the world mostly assumes that you're engaged in social media in some form now. Just like my friends don't text first day of school pictures anymore. They just
Right.
assume you're on social media. I don't post pictures of my kids on social media, so I have to text my pictures, right? And I just had to ask them to text me their first day of school pictures. But you can also just send text messages or create a group chat. There are lots of other ways that you can do it. I think there are those small joys that I do get out of following friends and family, but it is a counterpoint to the amount of negativity. I mean, from like a little bit of like joy to like a lot of negativity. I mean, even this is even the thing that I realized this morning after I looked at my week. I have an Aura ring, so it tracks like your stress throughout the day. My morning stress is lower when I don't use social media, because this morning I woke up at about 6:45. My house was dark. I got up. I made a cup of coffee. I had a few texts from friends who are in different time zones. I text them back. I had a nice chat with my friend who is in Europe time. And, then I opened up my book on aging and adventure and I read a chapter, and then my kids got up. That was a very pleasant way to spend the first, 20 minutes of my day. That is not how I had been spending the first 20 minutes of my day.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I mean, like you said, I get up, I pick up my phone, and like there's probably a whole other podcast on whether we're spending too much time on our phones, but whatever.
Yes.
We'll deal with that later.
That's step by step here. We're taking back our life step by step.
Yeah. But, so same thing. I like look at my email and I looked at messages, on Slack from our team, but that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then I kind of run out of things to do. So I'm like, oh, okay, that was, maybe 5 minutes instead of 45 minutes. And now I'm like, well, I guess I'll get up.
Yeah.
And then when I get up and I have breakfast, there is that moment of like, I'm used to like scrolling my phone. Like, what do I do while I eat breakfast? So I subscribe to the New Yorker. I have consistently been of the belief that I don't have time to read the New Yorker when it comes in paper. And I actually almost wish that they didn't have a subscription that required you to get paper, because I was like, I'm never going to have time to read these. Well, turns out I'm actually pretty much out of my backlog of New Yorkers at this point, because I just recycled a whole bunch of them a couple of weeks ago that now I kind of wish I had. But yeah, I'm like, oh, I can, it's the New Yorker. They have some short articles that are like a page long. If you're just like having a little breakfast, you can have, or some that are longer. But I mean, maybe over lunch, I'll have those articles and read them. But I get to the end and then I'm done. Yeah. And I go do something else. It doesn't have that incessant, like, what do you do? You want to see this? Keep this. Go, go, go. And then you're like, and also if I read a 20-page article in the New Yorker, I probably got something out of it because it was probably interesting, or I wouldn't have read it.
Yeah. I also feel like that it's such a different feeling, because I like to read like real paper books. That's just my thing. I can't get into the Kindle. I've tried for like as long as there have been Kindles. They have sometimes when I travel, I use them, but basically I like a good paper book. Partly because just like the New Yorker, you also get this validation of like, I did something, like, oh, I'm halfway through this book, or I read this chapter. There's like something kind of tangible. And I guess that's probably its own dopamine hit of like, good for me. I finished this chapter and then I'm going to go about my day. But that's just such a better feeling of accomplishment than I spent 30 minutes. I mean, let's think about how long those videos are that we're bombarded with too. I mean, I know that you're scrolling, but so much of that content is videos now. And those videos are, I mean, we post them, aren't they like 10 to 30 seconds, something? I mean, they're very short.
Under a minute.
They're under a minute. So let's say you're probably watching 30 to 45 individual pieces of content in 30 minutes, much of which you may not care about, much of which is making you anxious, all of which is destroying your focus for likely the rest of the day. And in all of it all of that data is being given to Meta to do whatever it wants with and to make money off of, because really that's what they're doing. Like, oh my gosh, it really just makes like my stomach sink when you really start to think about it.
It is. The other thing I was thinking about last night that I'd noticed, particularly on Threads, is there's so much stuff that is clearly AI generated, like attention grabbing junk, basically. So even if you're getting some value out of it, I would say upwards of 50%, maybe even like higher than that, was just someone and you saw like the same variations. It was kind of like, the women with cancer videos on Instagram. It was just like, you saw like one of these in the morning, and then by the end of the day, you'd seen like 10 slight variations of like basically the same story, all of which were clearly AI generated. And someone had been like, oh, people are clicking on this. Why was I doing that?
I know. It's so true. Also, everyone's creating more content with AI. So content creators, it is now, should be no surprise to anyone, it is faster to create content with the assistance of AI. And we're not saying that like we don't appreciate that. We use AI in our business where it's appropriate. But it's getting to the point that we got an email this morning and I wrote back to you. I said, there's no way a human wrote that email.
And I'm like, I completely agree.
AI generated.
Yeah.
So we're now getting more content that is not created by a person, that's not even created by a content creator necessarily, but it's like more. So if they're flooding it with more, that also means that it's going to have to get more attention grabby because they have to compete, right? If there's more, I bet if you could see a graph of like how much content's being pushed out, I'm sure it is just like growing at an astronomical rate.
Huge. Yeah.
And then it's all about attention grabbing. I mean, my goodness, everyone, one of my majors was media studies. I used to write papers on advertising and on how it grabs our attention and what it does to women. I mean, I vividly remember writing a paper about this, about disembodied female body parts as advertisements and what it says to women when they use disembodied like body parts. And here I am like consuming massive amounts of basically advertising that I'm not really engaging with. I'm just like a zombie, just like letting it wash over me. And I think that when I think about law school and the folks who are listening to this podcast, law school requires a lot of focus. It is something very hard. In fact, another book that I've picked up is about how we read. It turns out it's very technical and sciencey, so we'll see how far I make it as a psychology and media studies major. But I'm going to push through. But one of the things that I got from just the first section of that book was how complicated the process of reading is for our brains. Like, besides not only the visual information that we take in, we have to register what the words are. Apparently, we attach meaning to the words, but we also recall all the other possible meanings of a word. So our brain like picks the appropriate meaning per context. But if it's a word that has multiple meanings, you like recall all of them. I mean, it's actually pretty fascinating. It was a little mind-blowing to me about how this learned skill, because it's not something that we're biologically built to do. This learned skill requires a lot of energy, let alone you have to have working memory to be able to remember what you're reading and apply it to something else. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of brain power that IG was taking away from me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're talking to a lot of people in the beginning of law school now who are kind of struggling with these feelings of overwhelm and what should they be doing. And the advice I'm giving most people is like, look, you need to get to the level of being an expert law school reader as quickly as you can, which means you have to do the struggle part. You have to sit down and like struggle with this material and try to get through it and try to focus on it. And they're like, well, what about Quimby videos? I'm like, that's not going to probably help you get to this end goal. That's a different thing. And I think it's hard for people to really sit down and like struggle with this material. But the reality is that is what is going to get you to that next level as quickly as possible. And when you're at that other level, you're going to be able to do this so much faster. And that's kind of the whole point is like, if you can focus and get these skills and like do these things that are hard, you're going to get better fast. And then you're going to be better at doing everything else. But if you don't, you're never going to get to that point.
No. And let's be honest, at the beginning of the summer, I knew this was a problem because I set a summer goal for myself to read 8 books in 9 weeks. And I did, but I really had to make a concerted effort to read. That was when I started trying to replace my IG use with books. So clearly, based on my screen time usage, it wasn't working. Or maybe it was. I didn't go back.
Maybe it was worse.
See what it was. But I noticed that in the beginning, it was much harder for me to just sit on my couch and read, even for like 30 minutes without an idea popping in my head of something I had to do, or making a note on my phone, or checking my email, or doing something. By the end of the summer, I was traveling and I was on a plane and I read for almost 2.5 hours without really even looking. I think I drank some water. Yeah. But it didn't even occur to me that I had been reading. And I mean, the book was good, but it like wasn't that good. I mean, it was like, yeah. And I think when I think about law students and the amount of that type of focused work that you have to do, getting into flow, right? This idea that you're in a state where you're just kind of cranking through work and you lose track of time. I remember doing that a lot more back in the day than I do now. And as a law student, you have to be able to get into these states where you are just like present in the moment, reading something that could be hard. You cannot be checking your phone every 10 minutes and still attempt to go back and pick up what you were doing. It's just not possible. So if you're struggling, one, you need to just put down the devices and, create a practice of trying to read. But I'm here to tell you it gets better because it was like over that 9-week period, I was reading at a much faster speed with better working memory, the whole thing in just that period of time. And that wasn't nearly as much reading as I would have done if I was in law school.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this to me. And so I started doing an experiment where I took a book from the library, because I'm all about the library these days.
Yeah.
Got a library book. And when I went to get coffee, I would sit and try to read at least like 1 to 2 chapters. And yeah, in the first like couple of days, it was a struggle. Mm-hmm. But now if I don't get through like 2 chapters, I'm like, oh man, that's a bummer. Like, do I really have to go do something else now? Like, I was looking forward to finishing that chapter. So it does get so much easier. And I think pretty quickly once you start like retraining these pathways.
Yeah. I mean, our brains are much more apt to change than we give them credit for. And even to go back to old habits. I think, we have the benefit of having gone to law school before social media was really as omnipresent as it is. And law school was still really hard without all of these distractors, like it was also really hard. But I do realize that a lot of current law students haven't been doing graduate school or even undergraduate without these distractors. I think that you may think this is just a way of being. And I think it's important to realize that it's not a way of being. It is a choice. And that is, I think, a really powerful lesson, because I'm reflecting on my own pre-social media self, realizing I used to be better at some of this stuff. And you can claim that it's just because we're busy or we're distracted or we are older or whatever. And I'm like, nope, I think I just used to be better. And when I look at folks who are much older than we are in academia, I have friends that are professors who crank through publishing books. I mean, they're publishing books on a regular basis. Like, they like learned how to do all that stuff with all that focus. And I can guarantee you they're not spending time on social media messing around for 10 hours a week.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I don't know. I mean, I'm saying, hey, if you're listening to this, I would say maybe try a detox. Just experiment. Give yourself a week. See how it goes, because I think you'll be shocked by the results.
All right. So we're a weekend. What are you going to do?
I think I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think I am too. I think I still feel the pull to it. And so I need to do the detox long enough that I don't feel the pull to it.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I feel like there are some times, like there's sometimes I reach for the phone and I like, because I actually removed them like completely from my home screen and things, so I can't like push the button. And there are times where I find myself like reaching and I'm like, oh, it's not there. So yeah, we probably haven't really totally broken it.
No, I mean, that's addictive behavior.
Yeah. Fair. It's fair. We're still kind of feeling the clutches. So yeah, I think I'm just going to keep going and maybe never go back.
Yeah. Well, one of the books around this topic that I do think is incredibly powerful is Dopamine Nation, which blew my mind when I read it a few years ago. And I've had this push-pull with like managing social media use since I read that book. So if you want something to do with your extra 10 hours a week, if you're listening to this podcast, I think that's an interesting book to pick up, because it really does show you that our brains are being messed with. You know, the way our brains work are being manipulated. And like you said, we're giving, what is it? What's the Mary Oliver quote we all say? Our one wild and precious life.
Yeah.
We're giving 40 hours a month of our one wild and precious life to an internet company, social media company. So they can make more money. So they can make more money. And then
when they're already billionaires.
And like influence
don't
our
even get
elections.
started. That's like a whole other topic. Yeah. Basically, like, I don't really want to participate in that anymore, I don't think.
Yeah. So, so we'll have to do another update. If we keep going, we'll let you know if there reaches a point where we no longer want to look at it. I think that's going to be the next big milestone.
Yeah, we just forget it even exists. That's where we're heading. All right, well, everybody stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for watching. If you're watching, we do realize there's some irony in everyone watching this on YouTube, but please subscribe so you don't miss anything, because then it'll come to you instead of just being fed to you. And check out lawschooltoolbox.com and reach out with any questions.